I thought I should probably document my time in Vietnam in case some great grandkids might want to hear about it. So I'm going to do that. I have shared my Christian testimony about Vietnam briefly, and that's a whole different format in sharing my time in Vietnam. I'm going to leave spirituality out of this and just share an overview of my time in Vietnam. That was in 1968. So let's get started with it. I joined the Army in 1967, March of 1967. I enlisted as a military intelligence analyst. There would be 3 years of service in the military for signing up. And under that military intelligence analyst, what they call an MOS, they could make me a prisoner of war interrogator should they want to do so. Well, I didn't sign up to be one, but guess what? They volunteered me to be one anyway. It was kind of a last minute thing on their part, and I never had a chance to go to military language school to learn Vietnamese. So I had to rely on Vietnamese interpreters who understood a little bit of English. It's like we kind of taught them English, they kind of taught us Vietnamese, and none of us could speak the other language all that well, but that's another part of the bigger picture. So I was up in Alaska for 9 months after advanced training. I hoped to be up there 2 years, but that got circumvented, and so I got orders for Vietnam in late 1967. And they shipped me, flew me over to Hawaii, and we built up a brand new division there in Hawaii. And then by old World War II transport boats, they shipped us on over to Vietnam. It was about a 3-week time floating across the ocean. It was a terrible time for me in that I've always been prone since a young kid to have seasickness issues, motion sickness. And our unit, military intelligence unit, was right down in the hull of the ship. And oh my Lord, you know, the bouncing, nonstop bouncing. I was sick the whole time going over there. And we finally made it. And so in Vietnam, we got there 3 days before January 1 of 1968. So off the ship, we got our vehicles and equipment and loaded up and went convoy north. Oh, I don't remember now, 60, 70 miles ballpark, maybe less, to a location that they had a village up there. It was about 2 miles inland from the ocean called Duc Pho. And so we set up a new base camp at Duc Pho, and that's where I stayed mostly for the whole time I was over there in Vietnam. We had an interrogation center we built about a half mile out of the base camp. It was the only place we had where we could build a fenced in area to house the prisoners and be kind of off to ourselves. I don't know what other reasons we built it for, but that's what we did. And so So the procedure was for our military, our Army military soldiers to bring supposed suspects to us. They would truck them in and we would house them in the prison area, the barbed wire prison area, and we would try to see if we could get information out of them. They were not accused of harming American troops in any way. Most of them weren't. They were just innocent people living in their villages, and for various reasons they would bring them in and try to get us, or we would try to get information out of them. Thing was, they knew everything there was to know, for the most part, about the Viet Cong, and maybe some NVA actions. They knew because the Viet Cong lived amongst them and worked in the rice paddies pretty much during the day. Some of them, not all of them, and fought war at night. And then come the next daybreak, they were back to being your friends, working in the rice paddy, growing rice, and so they were your friend during the daytime, and they'd kill you at night. And it's very typical of guerrilla warfare. And so those local villagers knew all kinds of information. They had all kinds of information about these Viet Cong. And the Viet Cong, for those of you who may not know, the Viet Cong were local South Vietnamese people, mostly men, but some young women too. And they were just recruited and or volunteered to become part of the resistance movement against the South Vietnamese people. They wanted the North Vietnamese to be the government. They didn't want the South Vietnamese to be their government. And there were a lot of reasons why, which I won't get into, not in this setting. So it was very frustrating because when you talked to dozens and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these local villagers that they would bring in, it was like, nope, don't know anything. No, I don't know a thing. I don't see anything. I don't hear anything. I don't know anything. I'm just an innocent bystander in all of this. And you knew they were lying because if once they went back to their little hamlets or little villages and the word got to the Viet Cong that they spilled their guts to us, they'd be instantly killed, raped, harmed. Message would be sent loud and clear. Nobody talks to the Americans about what we do, basically underground in tunnel complexes. There were mines, there were all kinds of creative ways that they would set traps for the guys to hurt themselves up to the point of getting killed, of course. They knew nothing about those either. Nothing. And it got so frustrating because it, in a sense, it was like a big laugh. Wasn't funny, but it was like a big laugh because until you threatened them in some way to hurt them, they wouldn't divulge anything. Should you want to hurt them to get information out of them, most of them would lie to you just to get you to quit hurting them. And so it was a very difficult job, to say the least, in Vietnam. When we got, I gotta stop, there were times when in firefights, the guys, instead of shooting somebody that was trying to kill them, Viet Cong and or maybe an NVA, North Vietnamese soldier, that had come down from North Vietnam to join up with the NV or the Viet Cong. Rather than kill them, they'd bring them in and we'd try to get information out of them. And on a rare occasion, they would share some token information. I'm sure that's about all it was. And in one sense, it gave me and the interpreter, the Vietnamese interpreter, an opportunity to get out of that interrogation shack and go out, you know, have a change of scenery. And many times, I mean, we were on call 24/7, and we would sometimes have to go down the interrogation shack, we called it, at night and interrogate. So it was a day and night procedure. And so just to get out and break the boredom of that, we'd go out on campaigns that higher ups would say, okay. And so the ground troops would go out to that area we were going to go out to, and usually it was to find some tunnels, maybe some rifle ammunition and rifles, pistols, mortars, etc., in these tunnels hidden. And maybe a guy or two would be in there, but usually that wasn't the case. They knew we were coming and they got out of there or into deeper tunnels that we would never go into for fear for our lives. And so we would go out on those. Trips. I would. They didn't force you to. The Army didn't force you to as a military prisoner of war interrogator. It was voluntary, which I thought was a nice thing. So, but I went. I felt I was doing more out there than I was doing in the interrogation shack, and it was some excitement. And yeah, there were times, you know, it was a dangerous endeavor because a lot of times these hardcore prisoners would try to get us to walk into an ambush. That was always the issue. Other times they would show us tunnels, and they were always booby-trapped one way or another, so we would send the prisoner down there to retrieve any information, any equipment that might be down there, and found out really quick they didn't come back out. So then we got tying ropes to their legs and sent them in that way, and they had knives in there and cut the ropes. So it was not a very productive operation, to say the least. But there were firefights. There were times when snipers would shoot at us. Now you gotta know, my job was, the prisoner would be point. Then the interpreter usually would be right behind the prisoner. Then I would be the third person. Well, then all of the ground troops that had secured the area a day or two before to make sure we weren't walking into a major ambush, they would fan out behind us as terrain would dictate for them to do that wisely. But we would come under sniper fire, and bullets would be zinging around. And I remember one time we'd been over there a while, and we went into this Viet Cong NVA infested area. They had literally hospitals underneath the ground. We found out years later, after the war was over, they had been surviving a war with the French and Chinese and Japanese, I guess, and so they found out the only way they could really hold their own was to live underground in tunnel complexes. And so we one time we were in the My Lai 1, My Lai 2, My Lai 3 area. If you go back in history, that's the area where they had the My Lai massacre. We were in that area, so we always seemed like somebody would be shot at, wounded, killed, booby traps. There was always casualties every time I went, and understood it to happen, that it was happening very frequently, even if I wasn't there. So it was infested with the enemy, so to speak. And they'd have little spider holes. They'd come up out of the ground, AK-47, shoot one of our guys, get back down into the ground, have some little kid put the lid back on, or they could do it themselves. They were geniuses at it. And so we had casualties like that. Well, one time, one or more, or 3 or 4 of these snipers opened up on the group of guys I was with on this patrol this little mission to find a tunnel or three. And we were back in the trees, wasn't jungle, but you had your thick palm trees and various vegetation back there, so visibility was not the greatest. And bullets started coming from every which way. I was with the captain of that particular unit. We found an indentation in the ground, and he said, get in that and keep your head down. And man alive, you know, bullets were singing every which way over our head. It was hairy, to say the least, and it was going on, and shots going all over the place. You know, you don't know whether you're going to get overrun by the enemy or what's going to happen. And all kinds of strange things going on when you get in a situation like that. And them bullets weren't far above our head, let me tell you. It was not a very deep hole that we were on. Little indentation, so to speak. But finally the captain, he's on the radio and he's talking to some of his patrol squad leaders, and come to find out, after a whole bunch of yelling, screaming on the radio, he commanded everybody to quit shooting. So they did, and the shooting stopped. And I don't know, we had 6 or 7 of Americans dead and a number of them wounded. I never fully got the numbers on that particular occasion, but we got back in to our base camp, and the next night we had a bar in our particular base camp. It was the only place where a lot of people could get hard liquor. Because we were Army intelligence, we could get hard liquor, not a lot of variety. We could get Johnny Walker Scotch for, I think, $3 a bottle, maybe less than that. It was unbelievable. So everybody learned to drink Scotch. If you wanted hard liquor, you couldn't hardly get any other kind of liquor. Not hard liquor anyway. So this captain come over, and me and my buddy Tony Gay, my best friend over there at the time, he too was a prisoner of war interrogator. And we got talking to him about that firefight, and he hasn't had enough to drink down him, I guess, where he loosened up. And I said, man, that's one of the scariest things I've ever been involved in. He said, yeah, me too. He says, unfortunately, it happens all too often. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, what happens is a Viet Cong sniper will come up out of his hole, shoot some American, down his hole he goes, and if you got some new guys in the unit scared to death, you know, coming over from America into a war zone, they freak out and start shooting, and one shoots at the other one, and pretty soon they're shooting at each other, and they don't know, they're freaked out. And he said, we just start taking casualties by our own guys. And the Viet Cong are laughing down underground. We're doing their job for them. And he said, that's what we had. That's what you experienced. And he says, more casualties happen that way than the Viet Cong ever shooting us. Sad. So that was probably the hairiest situation that I ever got into. There were a couple of other situations where we got close to booby-trapped tunnels, and the prisoner would warn us of it and say, no, I'm not going in there, I'm going to get blown up, so back off. You know, we had sniper shots fired at us. That was pretty common, but I never had any, to my knowledge, hit close to me. I was blessed. Now, we'll move into timeline here. In 1968, I was over there about 3 months, all of us. And the Tet Offensive, the 1968 Tet Offensive, erupted. And that's where there was a mass call from the North Vietnamese to link with the Viet Cong to try to make a final push to break the backbone of Americans and the South Vietnamese soldiers. And in my area, as they did this in many areas, what had happened is, well, let's back up from that. Prior to what I'm about to share, we had bunkers around our perimeter, and they were manned day and night, mostly night, of course, because of the Viet Cong and NVA would try to overrun our base camp otherwise and kill everybody. So we had to have security guards posted at those bunkers surrounding the whole base camp. Now, I might say the base camp also had a big mound. I don't know, you know, there were some of those, I don't know why they were there, looked like mini volcanoes that would come up, and they would flatten the top of them and turn those into helicopter pads where helicopters could come and land and take off, and they would put artillery guns up there. They would have mortar placement. I don't know what else, M50 machine guns. There was an arsenal up on top of that where it gave them some advantage to be able to shoot down if need be. Now, just prior to this Tet offensive by the Viet Cong and North Vietnamese trying to basically win the war, an all-out attempt to demoralize us and win the war for themselves, they were sending in probably 15-year-old to 20-year-old girls. Most of them were pretty cute for Vietnamese. And they were forcing them to become prostitutes. Prostitute or we'll kill you. That's how it went. And so they, I don't know fully how it all happened, but our troops, having no girls to have intimacy with without getting graphic, were allowing these Vietnamese girls to come in about midnight at night through the barbed wire and tripwires and mines and everything else, and they would get in the bunkers and service the guys that wanted to be serviced. Well, the guys like that, because otherwise they couldn't go off base, they couldn't, you know, get with a prostitute if they wanted to. It was too dangerous. So this had been going on a few nights, and it was top secret. The guys in the bunkers didn't want anybody to know about it because they knew it was going to stop, so they kept it quiet. Well, then a couple of nights before the Tet offensive started, these gals were forced by the Viet Cong to take a hand grenade with them, and so when they got done servicing the guys in the bunker at 2, 3 o'clock in the morning, by then roughly, they'd throw a hand grenade in and blow all of our guys up. Well, it took us a couple of nights to figure out what was going on, and about that time, the Tet offensive began. And what that amounted to in much of South Vietnam, and surely amounted to in our area, was that a handful of Viet Cong, just a handful, would go into the little small villages, hamlets, and round up people at dark and all force them at gunpoint to march in unison as much as they could toward our base camp. Well, at night, they'd come in about midnight, 1, and from the top of the LZ, the landing zone, it looked like hundreds and thousands of enemy was going to overrun us. They had helicopter gunships going up there shooting at them. But they couldn't really know, not the first night. They just assumed it was the enemy trying to overrun our base camp. And so they opened up on top of the hill with everything they had down at these innocent people marching in. And fireworks, to say the least, till daybreak. Then it quieted down. And we were called, the helicopters went out and started picking up bodies that were still alive, barely, most of them, and transported them in to get medical attention. And we had to go talk to them, try to interrogate them with limbs missing and entrails hanging out and barely conscious. Many of them just dying right in front of you. They're so far gone. And we had such little medical help to help them. We were just an outpost, you know, didn't have much out there. We were at the ground level, so the hospital was up at division headquarters up at Chu Lai, and that's where they would go if there was transportation to fly them up there and give them a bed. It got overwhelming quick. I don't know the whole picture. All I know is they were coming in by the dozens and dozens and dozens, and they had no personnel, medical personnel to take care of them. So they're throwing them in a big old back shed, and they were stacking bodies up, and oh my. Well, anyway, that's how, in talking to these people, we found out what was going on, that the Viet Cong were forcing them to march toward the base camp in unison together, try to make like we were being overrun. Well, so the second night, it continued again, only there were more Viet Cong and NVA, it seemed, trying to overrun our base camp with what civilians was left, forcing them to come in. And they actually penetrated our barbed wire claymore mines, gasoline in 55-gallon drums that would ignite. All of the artillery and mortar and 50 caliber machine guns from on top of that landing was LZ was coming down, raining down on them all night. So that was night number 2, but still there were many that didn't die, though we're close to it, and so they would try to bring them in, as many as they could. And by the second day, we had so many bodies stackpiled in this room. Probably half of them were dead in the middle and in the bottom of the pile. I went through 3 Vietnamese interpreters, trying to get any information we could out of the people that could talk, and that was an impossible situation because most of them were so much pain they ain't gonna tell you nothing. It's like most of them were so incoherent. It was just something out of a horror movie. We had some interrogators that couldn't handle it. Me and 2 or 3 other guys went, figured somebody had to go, so we'd go in there. And I went through 3 Vietnamese interpreters, and finally they said, no more, can't handle this. Couldn't handle it, seeing their own people massacred like that. So we couldn't proceed anymore interrogating them. By about the 3rd or 4th night, I don't remember now, we unleashed hell from the air. The gunships fired machine guns from the air. We anything that moved, we shot in the dark. So there weren't enough people to march anymore by the time that whole thing got done in our area. I can't speak for other areas of South Vietnam, but I suspect it was very much the same. So that is, that was the Tet Offensive. And fortunately, we repelled the enemy, and they had to retreat, and so back into tunnels, back into hiding. But that was a hairy time. That was a difficult time. I will say that after that, I began to have nightmares, a lot of nightmares, where I could not sleep because of that. Hearing the moaning and seeing the blood and guts and the pain. I mean, we're talking little kids and old men, you know, innocent people that were forced to march against us. And I began to have nightmares really bad. To handle the nightmares, I drank alcohol, way too much alcohol, basically to pass out so I could sleep a few hours. Didn't have sleeping pills, didn't have meds of any sort to sleep, so alcohol was the only way we could do it. There was marijuana. For some guys that took marijuana, I tried it a couple of times just to retain my sanity, to laugh a little bit. Not at that time, but some time afterwards, and I didn't like it. Marijuana wired me. It didn't make me sleepy. Seemed to accentuate dreams rather than diminishing the impact of them, so I never pursued marijuana, though a lot of guys did. It helped them sleep, helped them to deal with the insanity of what they were living over there. Let's go to a funny story. Let's go to a funny story. That's pretty heavy duty stuff that I've been sharing. So we had, in our race camp, we had what we called hooches. And I don't remember the exact dimensions, but they were the old military army tents. You could get about 6, 7, 8 guys inside one. And that was our home. That's where we slept. And you had a bed and a couple of makeshift boxes for putting stuff on, and you put plywood barriers up from one to the other, so we had a little bit of privacy, just 4x8 plywood sheets. And you had 4x8 plywood sheets at the bottom of these dwellings, and then it was canvas tops up above that. And we had some 2x4s or 2x8s for rafters to put the tent over, so there was a little bit of wood ceiling area for the tent to rest on. Well, one night, it was in there, we had a guy by the name of Block. I don't remember his first name. His last name was Block. He was a lifer. That guy was kind of emotional, stretched and strained at times. And he'd gone out into, he was a prisoner of war interrogator. He worked with the aerial reconnaissance division area where they did aerial reconnaissance video. That's not coming to me. He worked over in that section, wasn't a prisoner of war interrogator, but he was housed with us. And of course everybody drank. Everybody went to bed buzzed up just to survive or to sleep, both. And yet not get so stinking polluted drunk that you couldn't get up and fight if you had to, protect yourselves. Well, this old Block, he went out on a mission for one reason or another, and for a day mission, and the helicopters would, everybody get on a helicopter and fly back to their base camp, except he got left. He got left out there all by himself, and it's starting to get dark. He's out in this rice paddy, and here comes all these Vietnamese people out of the trees and the woods, probably to save him, but he didn't know that. He thought it might be the enemy, so he shot a whole bunch of innocent people. Probably didn't shoot a Viet Cong at all, but he shot all of his ammunition. Somehow, whether he had a radio or they just remembered, turned around, went back, picked him up. He was happy to get picked up out of that situation. Well, he come back. He was all freaked out for a few days. Well, the next night, him being freaked out, I don't know if he had anything to drink or not, it didn't matter. This guy was still dealing with being left out to survive on his own at dark with no lights and only a few clips of M16 rounds. He was a little upset about that. So we're sleeping, it's midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, everybody's just having, some rest, and all of a sudden Block starts screaming at the top of his lungs. He's on the far end of the hooch, I'm on the other far end of the hooch, and of course there's a walkway down the center of it, and I hear old Block screaming, "Hey, there's a bobcat in here. There's a mountain lion in here. There's a crazy wildcat of some sort in here." And so I grab a pistol. Yeah, I got a pistol. I grabbed that, grabbed my flashlight, and get out of bed and step in the aisleway to look and shine down, and here Block was with his M16 rifle pointed at this animal running right at me, full bore. And it's happening so fast, and then I just see, all it is a big old tomcat. That's all it really was. And I'm screaming at Block not to shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot, it's a cat, it's a cat. Well, fortunately, by God's grace, he didn't pull the trigger. Well, anyway, this cat, he's running full bore at me. And the guys are out of their beds with the lights on this cat. And I'm screaming, Block, don't shoot, don't shoot, don't shoot. It's just a tomcat. Scared to death. So, at that point, the cat sees me standing in the way, does a 180, turns around, starts running into different cubicles, trying to find a place to escape, and that's a dead end for him. And finally he runs out of places to try to get out of that tent while everybody's screaming, yelling, flashlights are on him. Oh Lord, it was a madhouse. Well, then this cat, out of desperation, jumps up. Somehow he gets up in the rafters of our tent, our hooch, and now the flashlights are on him, and they're screaming and yelling, and this cat is he's going from rafter to rafter looking for a place of safety, and with all the screaming and yelling and flashlights and hooting and hollering, this poor cat, oh Lord. Well, Block is still screaming, shoot him, shoot him, shoot him. It's a wildcat. He's convinced this is a wild predator gonna gobble us all up. And I thought, I'm getting out of here. Somebody's gonna get killed, and it might be me. So we had doors on each end of the hooch, and I was at one end. I backed out of that thing and got away, waiting for gunshots to go off at any minute. Well, finally they got smart, opened up both doors, propped open the doors, and all got down at one end and just waited, and that cat kind of figured out what was going on and finally jumped down out of the rafters and out the hooch he went, I guess. I didn't see it, but didn't come out the door. I was nearby, but so that was the episode of the wildcat. They took away Block's gun the next day at sunrise, and I don't remember how long he went without a gun, but that was an interesting experience. Well, now we're going to get serious again. There's so many different things that I could share, and I don't want to get into the ugly side too much of every military conflict like that, but I do want to share a couple of things. So I'm going to. And this My Lai 1, My Lai 2, My Lai 3 area was at the foothold of the mountains. It was on flat land leading out to the ocean with shrubbery here and there and rice paddies and brush pockets, etc. But it was very near the foothills of the mountains to the west, and we all knew, everybody knew in that area that this was a stronghold of the Viet Cong, if not also the NVA. We just couldn't prove it. But every time our guys went in there on a patrol of some sort, casualties were taken. And this grew as it would grow on anybody. When you see your buddies closer than your family almost get killed, maimed, time after time after time. Then you got new guys replacing them and they're scared to death and you don't know if they're going to freak out and shoot you. Things happen. So many things happen that are not Hollywood material that anybody would pay money to go see. And when My Lai massacre happened, that was around, I believe, March 16 of 1968. I'm not positive. I think that is the timeline that it officially happened. For those of you who don't want to read, American troops went in there that had been going in there time and time again. And they opened up and started shooting anybody that basically moved, little kids, old people, anybody that moved, they shot them down. And a helicopter pilot or two caught wind of it and turned the helicopters at some of the guys and threatened to shoot machine guns at our American guys if they didn't stop. I don't know all of the details. They got so blurred and so smoothed over, and it was an embarrassment to the military and to the people in Washington, D.C. running the government. And so it's hard to know exactly what happened. You can go read about it on the internet if you want to. All I know is that one night, the Tet Offensive had hit, but it hadn't died completely. And there was so much activity going around, and there was an extreme high activity going on in that My Lai 1, My Lai 2, My Lai 3 area. They thought that it was a staging area for the 48th Viet Cong Battalion. Maybe yes, maybe no, I don't know. All I know is that one night, a friend of Tony's, Tony Gay was my interrogator friend, partner, I was closest to, and he closest to me. He had a friend that worked over in the communications section of our unit, and this friend happened to come over to the bar, was sitting at the bar with Tony and I, and had, some drinks, some Johnny Walker red scotch, and couldn't get it elsewhere. And so he began to tell us what had happened the day before. He was out on assignment with his 35mm camera in the My Lai area with these troops when they executed this supposed massacre. Well, it was a massacre. It was, not a supposed. And he got film of it. He took a lot of canisters of 35mm film of it, and he's sitting there and asking Tony and I what he felt he should do. It's like, I feel a moral responsibility to report this to the highest authorities in America. It's like, is this happening in other localities in South Vietnam? I mean, this can't be the only place this is happening. This is just not right. I don't care who wants to justify it. It's not right. Killing innocent people in the name of anger, frustration, to whatever. And so, well, we didn't know what was right either, but we did encourage him to consider being extremely careful about who he released the film to, because if it got into the hands of the people there in Vietnam, the commanding officers, they put a hit on him, put him out of commission. They could do all kinds of different things that may not be beneficial to him. And so we told him, whatever you end up doing, just be really, really wise about it. And if you can, get out of Vietnam before you release them, or unless you got somebody you can send them to over stateside that you can trust, just be careful for your own life. That's what we're saying. But truly, it was just sickening to hear about what had happened there. But personally speaking, it didn't surprise me whatsoever, because I had been in there on a number of different missions. with a prisoner, my interpreter, Chow. Chow was my favorite interpreter, South Vietnamese interpreter. He had defected from North Vietnam, had come down and joined the South Vietnamese army, and they made him a interpreter. And we knew, you just had a sense of knowing this could happen, a massacre like this could happen at any time, because when your buddies are getting blown up, shot up, maimed, and you talk to the local people, you know, where are these people hiding in holes? Where is the enemy? You know, we don't know nothing, we don't know anything. So these guys probably, I'm assuming, just finally said, well, we'll solve this little dilemma. If you don't know, we're going to shoot everybody in the village. We'll shoot everybody. And then anytime we see somebody on the ground moving, we'll shoot them too. We'll solve this dilemma really quick. I can't say that's what happened, but I wouldn't be surprised the justification, the motive behind killing all of these innocent people. And say innocent, you don't know. Viet Cong could have been right in the middle of it. You just didn't know. So this passed. You know, this guy, they shipped him off. We didn't know where he went. He must have told somebody, and they shipped him off. Well, it was about a year and a half later that it came out in the public in the United States. I was stateside by that time, where they exposed this massacre, and I don't remember the exact timeline, but some photographs taken by this individual were released in Life magazine, I think, or Look magazine. I think it was Life magazine. They had several photos of dead people and people getting shot, and so, but that's a whole other story. But now let's get to something that directly affected me. Not long after that massacre, and knowing that it was a critical staging area for the NVA, the North Vietnamese Army, to bring down supplies to the Viet Cong to help them keep fighting, that area in the mountains and right there in that area was filled with tunnels underneath, and they stockpiled ammunition and medicine and foodstuffs and whatever, you know, under the ground, tunnel complexes. And so they wanted us interrogators, to go up there and keep working, trying to find out what in the world we could find out. And so my favorite interpreter, Chow, we went up there frequently, and it was just, we don't know, nobody knows. And it just become a record that we didn't want to hear playing it much anymore. Well, about that time, I was told that they were going to send me out of my base camp to a base camp closer to the My Lai 1, My Lai 2, My Lai 3 area. And my interpreter. And the reason why was because they had a double agent who claimed he was aware that they had captured a dozen or more American troops. They were being held in a staging area up in the mountains, and the assumption was that they would either be killed, but more likely be marched up to North Vietnam, up through the jungles, to be imprisoned in North Vietnam. And so we were linked up with an individual in a compound, an old bombed out city, looked like about Gaza, you know, right now, nothing but rubble. And then we went into this compound that looked like something from outer space, and it was a big dome, wasn't huge, but it was a big dome to protect it from mortars. artillery from the enemy. And we go inside, and we got carpet, we got nice furniture, we got a flush toilet. It's about 6 months into Vietnam now for me, and boy, I go to the toilet, and it's got a flush toilet, and I'm just flushing it, hear that gurgling sound, because all we had was outhouses, you know, on the base camp where I was at. So, man, to hear a flush toilet, it was like checking into a Holiday Inn. Well, there was an older gentleman there in fatigues, not fatigues, but just civilian wear, smoking his pipe, you know, and seemed to be really calm, gentle, wonderful guy, and made us feel comfortable. And he said, now, the reason you're here is because there is a young boy, about 15 years old, who claims he has information about this holding area where these American prisoners are being kept, and we want to go in and mount a campaign to try to capture them before they go to Vietnam or get killed, okay? And so timeliness is a very important issue. But we don't know how reliable this information is from this young South Vietnamese kid. And so you got to understand a little something here. In our military intelligence detachment, I was talking too fast. We have the interrogation section. We have the aerial section where people working there, they would examine photographs taken from above to look for enemy information that would be pertinent on the ground. And then they had the agent section where they had a few agents who would try to get South Vietnamese people to squeal, to tell about the enemy's activities, and they would pay them for that information. Some of them might actually have been Viet Cong, so I don't really know. It was kept super secret from us. And but this kid, this 15-year-old South Vietnamese kid, had been a double agent by our unit. And so they had interrogated him to the best of their ability and thought that he probably had valid information. But the CIA guy, he wanted me and Chow to interrogate this kid again thoroughly to see if we felt he was lying or telling the truth. Because the problem was, when you're paying these Vietnamese people to be, you know, agents or double agents for money, which they couldn't get otherwise, they'd tell you all kinds of fabricated lies and hope and not get caught to make extra money. So the better lies they told, the more money they usually made. Well, there wasn't any better story to come up with than, hey, there's some American soldiers that have been captured and they're up where we can get at them if we move quick enough. So that was very important information to the military. And so this, see, the thing was, Chow, my interpreter, everybody knew he was the best. This guy was ugly looking, mean looking. He was pretty good size for a Vietnamese. Again, I said from North Vietnam. But this guy, he just hated the Viet Cong. He hated the NVA, and he was so thorough. I sit back and just take notes. There was nothing I could say or do. He ran the interrogation, essentially. He knew what we were trying to get after. And he was... He would inflict pain on some of these prisoners secretly to get information, and so he was the one they really wanted to interrogate this 15-year-old kid. So the CIA guy, or the guy that claimed he worked for the CIA, I don't know, assumed he worked for the CIA, said he was, said, you can do anything you want to do to this kid. Just don't kill him. Well, what do you mean in it? You can inflict any pain, any interrogation technique you know of to see whether he's lying or telling the truth. Because if he's not telling the truth, and we send hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of American soldiers to go up and try to surround the Viet Cong that's holding those prisoners, we're going to be in a major battle up there. And that is all NVA Viet Cong stronghold. We don't ever go up into those mountains otherwise. We bomb it with B-52s, but we don't send guys up there. No, it's an instant, we're going to get killed, okay? We're not going to do that to our troops. So it's important that we find out whether this kid's lying or not, because he might be. And so, okay, and he assured us, you can do anything but kill him, don't kill him, and I'll back you up so there's no repercussions from it. Well, there were a lot of repercussions at that time. Stateside, you know, it was growing anti-war, and so they had what was called the CID, which were the cops trying to catch Americans harming the Vietnamese people, especially, you know, those that were captured. So I'll get past all of that craziness that was going on. I said, okay, so we interrogated this kid for a couple of days, put the heat on him. The heat was basically one of the most effective interrogation techniques we used was the old crank, World War II crank telephone, and you put bare wires on their fingers, different parts of their body, crank it, and it sends DC current into the area, and the faster you crank it, the more it shocks them. But it's DC current, and it wouldn't kill them, but we would tell them it would kill them if they didn't tell us the truth. So many prisoners talked when we'd wire them up with the telephones. You pour water on it, it would actually make the pain more intense. Sometimes we had 55-gallon drums filled with water. For the hardcore prisoners, we'd put them in water, wire them up, crank on them, and put the fear of God that we were going to electrocute them slowly to death if they didn't talk. And some of them were, you know, they didn't know the difference between AC and DC current. You know, peasants live and die growing rice out there. And it was an effective technique. But some would lie out of stress, so, you know, you had to weigh who's lying, who's telling the truth, and somewhere in between. So this kid, when we would put the heat on him, oh yeah, you know, I'm telling you the truth, I'm telling you the truth, I'm telling you the truth. Well, then, okay, you take the stress off of him, take the pressure off, then you turn around and say, no, I'm lying, I didn't do this. Well, so then you'd wire him back up. Are you lying or not? Yes, I am. No, I'm not. This kid was Jekyll and Hyde. And so in the process of him trying to get away from us so we wouldn't continue to execute excess pain on him to try to get him to tell the truth, he said, I know where a tunnel complex is, where a map supposedly is exactly where these prisoners, American prisoners, are being held. I just heard the general area, but I haven't seen the map. But I think it's in a tunnel in the My Lai area. And if you'll take me up there, I'll go in that tunnel and see if I can find that map. And there may be some other things, valuables. I've heard that about 3 high-ranking Viet Cong officers stay in that tunnel from time to time. So we said, okay. So we arrange a helicopter, and my interpreter Chow and myself, we get on the chopper and fly up to the My Lai area to have this kid go check out this tunnel. Now, 2 days prior to that operation, the guys that had been involved in the My Lai massacre, that were, you know, was up there taking hits and getting killed and maimed and all of that for weeks and months prior, you know, they're the ones backing us up, securing the area so we can safely fly in there as much as possible. And so we land the chopper. The kid says, okay, it's all sandy, but then there's a little mound, off the way about, I don't know, 70, 80 yards. He said, so that tunnel is right on top of that mound, and the mound was covered with brush and stuff. So we go up to the top of the mound, and sure enough, there's a hole in the ground about maybe 5-6 feet in diameter, and it was all black, muddy water. And he said, so now, he said, I've never been in the tunnel, I've just heard about it, excuse me. But he says, I'll go in, I can't promise you I'll come back out, because many times they'll hold me captive if somebody's in there. They won't let me come out. So we had to make that choice and said, well, you know, if there's somebody in there, tell them to come out, because we're going to blow them out if they are. But you got to tell us. We don't want to blow that map up. Of course, they weren't going to respond to that, but that's beside the point. So anyway, we got about a dozen of these hardcore troops that had secured the area for us. They were standing nearby watching. And the kid ducks down underneath the water, goes into the water. He's down there forever, my guys. We figured, okay, there's somebody there, they're holding him, and he's not going to come out. And after it seemed like forever, he comes out of that water, spitting and sputtering, spit water out of his mouth, all freaked out, eyes bugging, and he gets his breath. He finally gets his breath, and he says, oh my guys, he says, I went in there, and he couldn't see, of course, it's all muddy water, and flashlight wouldn't have done any good. And he says, I got in there and the tunnel came to an end, and it's all I could do to turn around and swim back out with the breath of air that I had taken. Oh Lord, okay, is he lying to us? Is he telling the truth? We don't know. All right, got to stop here. The guys standing around watching said, this kid is just bluffing. He's lying, or he doesn't want to show you where the real tunnel is, where this map is being held, and maybe some other goodies. So they're ready to shoot this kid. I know it. They're ready to shoot, and they had taken a lot of casualties for this. There was more to the story than I'm trying to keep it short, and it's difficult for me to do. So I demand that he goes back in there and looks for another tunnel. All right, kid goes down second time, comes back up, spit and sputter, and he said, nope, found another tunnel that branched off, and it's a dead end too. Oh Lord, these guys got their M16s pointed at this kid, and I'm waiting for them to shoot any second. And again, the CIA, remember, you can do anything you want to do, but don't kill him. So I'm telling these guys, don't shoot him. He's hot, don't shoot him. This involves getting some of our guys, keep him from going up to North Vietnam or not if he's telling the truth. He's just, young kid is scared, he's schizo, and I think he's probably lying about it, but we can't be sure, but we don't want to kill him this way. So send him back in a third time. Kid goes back in a third time. Says he found the third tunnel, which we didn't believe. Came to a dead end, narrowed down, hard to turn around, come back out. He said, all three tunnels are blocked off. He says, I can't find a tunnel entrance in there where you can go in up above water level and breathe. So the guy said, see, we told you, he's just lying, he's just bluffing, let's waste him. And I know they're going to waste him. I know they're going to waste him. I know they're going to waste him. Not a doubt in my mind. And I don't know if I prayed to this day, God help. First of all, I didn't want a 15-year-old kid to get shot. I didn't know if he's just scared to death trying to make a little extra pocket money. Who knew? But I didn't think it warranted killing this kid. So I thought I need a diversionary tactic. I don't know if I prayed or not. It's been too long ago. All I know is I need a diversionary tactic. I need to get this kid away from this mud hole and get him down off the hill, get him down into the ground. I had remembered seeing a coral rock, had kind of a flat face that went up about 8-10 feet in the air. And I remember as we were walking up to that mound to look for that tunnel, I remember seeing it. And I said to these guys, hold it. Don't shoot him. If anybody shoots him, I'm going to shoot him. Whoa, what's that about? I said, you watch. Let's go down. Get him out of that water. Let's go down. I'll show you. Oh, yeah, we ain't got time for this. What are you going to do? I said, he's got 10 fingers. I'm going to shoot one finger at a time until he tells us whether he's lying or if he's telling the truth. You're going to do what? You? Wow, okay, we got to see this. I'm stalling for time. So we get down on the flat ground, down below the little mound there, and I tell my interpreter, Chow, I said, tell him go stand in front of that rock, coral cliff kind of thing coming up out of the ground, stick his hands in the air, hold them still, and I'm going to shoot one finger at a time until he tells me the truth, that he's lying or whether he didn't know that there was no tunnel to go into or he was afraid to go into the tunnel. Got a lot of questions, and he can sing or he cannot sing. So there's a rock, another rock off about, I'd say 50, 60 yards from where this kid's standing. Hands is shaking like crazy. He doesn't know if I'm going to shoot him or not. And I get down on that rock, got open sights, M16, and these guys say, oh, so you're going to shoot a finger off at a time at this distance? Who do you think you are, man? You need a scope to do this. Besides that, the kid's hands are shaking. Which finger are you going to shoot? I said, on his left hand, I'm going to shoot the tallest finger. That's the middle finger. Well, where are you going to shoot it at? I said, right through the knuckle. Just dead sober, no spit and sputter. Well, you're going to shoot this kid through the knuckle at this distance with an open sight, with his hand going like this, right? I said, yep. Might have to take a few shots, but that's what I'm going to do. He's got 10 fingers. He's going to lose them all till he starts telling us the truth or not. And these guys start, they start chuckling and laughing about this. Well, that's the whole purpose. I want them to get off their mind, let's kill this kid and move on. Okay, it was just a stalling, diversionary tactic on my part. I know how crazy it sounded, but I didn't have much time to make a decision on what to do about it before he gets shot. And so I'm telling Chow, tell him to hold his hand still. I might shoot him in the palm of his hand or his wrist, the way he's, shaking up there. Well, this kid didn't respond to that, but point being, I had no intention of shooting any of his fingers off. I had no intention of shooting him, period. I just wanted to scare him. So I thought I was aiming about a foot high over the top of his left hand to miss purposely. Touched the round off. Oh my gosh, down on the ground he went, holding his hand, screaming and yelling top of his lungs, flopping around like crazy. So we all walk over there, and wouldn't you know, I had shot that kid's knuckle, dead center. Well, an M16 copper round, it didn't blow the finger off, it just made a hole through his knuckle, okay? But blood's coming out like crazy. And so I tell Chow, now, tell him, I want to know, is he lying or telling the truth? Well, these guys, okay, they're standing around and saying, can you believe that? Can you believe this guy? You ever see anybody shoot this accurate? And like, how in the world? Man, this guy knows how to shoot. And I'm just playing it down like, Oh, if you only knew. I didn't mean to hit him. It was an accident. But I got to play the game. I got to get these guys to leave this kid, leave him alone. So I tell Chow, it ain't funny. It's so sick. It's so sad. But I tell this my Chow, I said, tell him to stand up. He's got 9 more fingers. Tell him. And the kid's so out of it, you know, he's probably nearly in shock at this point, terrorized, scared, fearful. And he don't know if the next bullet's going to go through his head or heart or what, I'm sure. And he knows these other guys want to kill him. Chow had already said, you're going to be dead any second if you don't tell us the truth here, because they're going to waste their time, okay, on you. So, stand him up, and he keeps grabbing that finger to keep it, you know, from bleeding to death, or it seemed like it was. And we're yelling, hold your hands up, got 9 more fingers to go. And I'm ready to shoot a second time over the guy's finger, so I don't hit him accidentally a second time. And all of a sudden, he just falls over and passes out on the ground. He just passes out. And so they now waking him up. So these guys, the commander, the platoon leader, whatever he was, says to this guy, come on, this kid, he's a waste of our time. Let's get out of here. And so they turned around and walked away. And was I ever thankful? Well, called the chopper in. Everybody got on the chopper. We flew back to base camp, and then they processed, took him to the hospital, did whatever, and then they just processed him on up to the division headquarters, which was up in Chu Lai. We never heard any more about it, which was not unheard of. You know, once we released them and they went up 70, 80 miles to division headquarters, we never heard from them again, except, and I'll get to something about that exception a little bit later, show you the insanity, the craziness of this conflict. It was about 3 weeks later. Ends up, I get with a colonel, a general. General contacts me with my interpreter, has a helicopter fly in. The 3 of us are in the passenger compartment, and we fly up over the My Lai area high, and we went up there, and he said, now what this kid has been telling you about where these prisoners supposedly are being held, can you kind of point it out, just because I don't want to send our guys up there to get ambushed, killed, maimed, etc., etc. I'm trying to do everything I can before we launch this campaign. We're going to do it tomorrow. We're going to do it. So we went up, looked out over the mountains. It's like, it was a big waste of time. But he really was more concerned. He said to Chow, he wanted to interrogate Chow. He says, Chow, what in your heart, do you think this kid's telling the truth, or do you think he's lying? Chow said, well, aside from the fact that he looks like he's schizophrenic, he's scared to death, he's probably lying and afraid that he's going to get exposed and he's not going to make any more money anymore. And maybe somebody's going to kill him in the process. I don't think it's reliable information. But I can't tell you for sure whether he's lying or not. And the general then said, well, we're going to have the campaign. We may not find anything. We may take casualties, but we've got to try to, if we have American soldiers being held prisoner up there, we want to try to retrieve them, so we're going to go ahead with it. Well, long story short, took a lot of information, a lot of time to go by. It was 2-3 weeks later that we found out they did the campaign, and they found absolutely nothing up there. They didn't find any evidence of anybody being in that general area. So every indication was the kid indeed was lying, or had the wrong area, or we didn't really know. Well, it was 3 or 4 weeks later from that whole time frame, later summer, where my commanding officer, lieutenant, says, hey, we have to go up to a place and they want to ask you some questions. And I don't know any more than that, but they want to ask you some questions. Well, what about? Well, I don't know. They're not telling me other. They're just ordering me to have you and I go up in a Jeep to such and such place. So we go up to such and such place. We go into this tented plywood tent area, just like what we slept in, and there was a couple of big desks in one end of it. Nothing in the complex other than 2 chairs, one in each corner, back several feet. I was told to go in and sit in one chair, still having no clue what was going on. Pretty soon they had 5, 6 high-ranking officers come and sit down in chairs behind the table. Well, then somebody marches in this 15-year-old kid with a big bandage on his finger. Set him over in a chair on the other side of the corner. He's facing them, I'm facing them, and immediately a high-ranking American officer who spoke fluent Vietnamese, I had picked up some Vietnamese, being over there 6, 7 months roughly by that time, so I could understand some of the questions being asked. I wasn't always able to speak it that well, but I could understand quite a bit of Vietnamese language by hearing it. So they asked this kid, we want you to look at this guy over to your left in the corner and identify him as the one who shot your finger. I got that. I knew that. I understood that. Well, this kid, when told to do that, he slowly is turning his head to look at me, to identify me or not, and suddenly he snaps his head right back and he's looking right at that officer again. So this officer said, well, is he or isn't he? Look at him and identify, yes or no. Raises his voice, and this young Vietnamese boy, he starts to do this again. He's turning his head slowly, and he gets at about 35 degrees, maybe, snaps his head right back. And it's like, I'm watching this whole thing, and well, this is weird, Why can't that kid look at me? Yeah, that's all I can think. Why can't this kid look at me? Obviously, he's going to say, yeah, that ugly guy is the one who shot me. And so we went through that, seemed like half a dozen times. And this kid absolutely could not turn his neck far enough to make eye contact at me. I don't know if it was God. I don't know if he was so afraid that I might somehow be able to retaliate against him. I don't know to this day. All I know is this kid refused to turn completely and look at me and say, yep or no, he's the one who shot me or wasn't the guy who shot me. Well, this high-level officer and a couple others, they were exploding at this point. They start screaming at this kid to identify me. And he won't, because he won't look at me. Finally, they yelled, haul this kid out of here. So it's just me in the hot seat and these officers, and this one commanding officer who was running the whole thing says, Rasmussen, we know that you are torturing these prisoners, and we're going to catch you at it, and we're going to throw you in the brig jail, and throw away the key, and you're going to spend the rest of your life rotting away in a prison for harming these prisoners. What do you got to say? I said, well, first of all, I never shot the kid in the finger. These guys, they were the ones that wanted to kill him, and somebody fired a shot, went through his finger, he passed out, then they decided, let's not mess with it, I guess, and they walked off. So I said, you're accusing me of shooting the kid through the finger. Wasn't me at all. It was them. Go talk to them. You're lying. We're going to catch you. Well, okay. They couldn't prove it because the kid wouldn't look at me and identify me. Hauled the kid off, never knew what happened to the kid again. All I know is I went to my commanding officer and I said, go hunt that CIA guy up. I want to talk to him. This is not good. Not good at all. Well, we can't find the CIA guy. He's moved on and he's nowhere to be seen. I said, oh, the guy that was supposed to back me up if anything went wrong, he's now gone. He's not accessible. How do you like this? So I had close to 3/4 of my tour in Vietnam done with, maybe a little more than that. And so after that, I decided I couldn't trust those that I needed above me to keep me out of prison, doing my job. And so I developed a very sophisticated interrogation technique. It's just called be a nice guy. See, by the rules we played by, we weren't supposed to hurt the prisoners. We could yell, we could scream, but we physically were not to hurt the prisoners at all. That was the way we were told from the beginning. Of course, that was a big laugh, but we weren't supposed to. So from then on, day in and day out, individual after individual after individual, they would bring them in to have me interrogate them and sit them down and look across the table at them and say, well, what do you want to talk about? What's life like growing rice? What's life like being in conflict? How many kids you got? How many grandkids you got? What do you do for entertainment? What do you think about this, that, one thing, or another? And that's it? Yep, that's it. You get a hardcore prisoner that wouldn't talk. Caught in a firefight trying to kill Americans. But they, instead of killing him, they sent him in to try to have us get information out of him, which we never got. And I'm going to explain about that in a little bit here. I had one hardcore prisoner. I had about a month left to go. Now, this was getting everybody's attention because Norm was the guy who, between him and Chow, he could put hurt on prisoners and get information that nobody else wanted to do. That was more Chow than me, but hey, our job was there to get information to help the American cause and the South Vietnamese cause, right? So we had this hardcore prisoner who had been caught in a firefight, killing GIs. He wasn't going to talk. Knew that, so that was all a big waste of time for me to be trying to get anything out of him. So he's sitting there and I said, hey, want a Marlboro? Marlboro? Cigarette? Yeah. Can I get you something cold to drink? Yeah. Got him a soda pop. I don't know if he ever had one his whole life up to that point. Well, tell me, if you would. I was really nice. No screaming, no yelling, smiling, trying to make him feel warm and comfortable, cozy. And I said, can I ask you a few questions? Yeah. Why are you doing what you're doing? Huh? Why are you trying to kill Americans and South Vietnamese people? What's your reasoning behind it? And then I said, is it because you believe the communist lies that their way of running South Vietnam is better than the the North Vietnamese better than the South Vietnamese government running South Vietnam? You know, why is communism, we were told the North was taking over the South for communism purposes, okay? That's what we were told. I had no reason to dispute that. So this guy looks at me all kinds of baffled, and he said, what's the word communism? I've never heard the word communism. I don't know what that is. And Chow's trying to explain it to him, and this guy, he's all eyes are twisted, and he don't get it. And he said, well, let me answer your original question. Why am I on the Viet Cong side? I knew that he was a hardcore Viet Cong. And I told him, I promise you, I'm not going to do anything to you. I assure you, I'm not going to touch you. I'm not going to hurt your feelings and shout at you. I want you to have a good experience here. I'm not lying. And I think he believed that. And he said, why am I doing what I'm doing? He says, it's really simple. You know, all we do down here, 90% of the people in South Vietnam, roughly all they do is grow rice and a few other things to feed their families to live on all year long. That's all we do. That's all the time we have is spent trying to mainly grow rice and process it. We get a little extra, we can sell it, but mostly to feed our families. The South Vietnamese government has come in and started taxing us 20, 30, 40, 50%, taking away our rice. Well, we don't have enough rice to feed our kids, our families. So the North Vietnamese have said, if you let us have control of the South Vietnam government, the South Vietnam will only tax you 2, 3, 5% of your rice. So whose side would you be on? I'm saying, seriously? He said, yeah, that's why we're all down here fighting. You know, we don't know anything about communism, socialism, we call it whatever you want. We're just here to try to get a government that'll quit stealing all of our rice so we can take care of our families. Oh my gosh, and I've been hurting Vietnamese people for this. Oh, my heart sank 1,000,000 miles. And I said to Chow, Chow, is he telling the truth? He said, yeah, you didn't know this, Norm? No. He said, no, that's the real reason why the Viet Cong are the Viet Cong. You know, that's why they're just fighting for enough food to feed their families. Oh, so that's how corrupt the South Vietnamese government has become, and the tax collectors. Okay, wow. So that's how I ended out my tour in Vietnam, by being a nice guy, trying to make it warm and comfortable. And my interrogation reports, that we always had to fill out an interrogation report, sign it, date it. I used to have lengthy 2 and 3 and 4 pages of stuff from some of the people I interrogated. Mine was always the shortest now. I asked him if he was a bad guy. He said no. Okay, out the door. I asked him if he was a bad guy. No. No. Do you kill people? No. Do you try to hurt Americans? No. Nope. Let's go back a little bit. Roughly half of my time, about mid-1968, when there were firefights, when the guys out there were in firefights, and they would capture, well, you know, I mean, normally they'd just kill the Viet Cong shooting at them. But every once in a while they would let one live and hope that we could interrogate that prisoner and get some meaningful information from them. Well, by that time they knew their rights. If they didn't confess to any crime, they knew we would release them back to where they came from. No repercussions. That word spread quickly. So these hardcore prisoners caught in firefights where they should have probably been shot, because it was a huge waste of time, and I'm going to tell you about what's going to happen to them. We were finding they would bring in the same prisoner we had interrogated month earlier, 3 weeks earlier, and here he's caught another firefight. This happened with 3 or 4 or 5 of them, not a ton. And hey, we were talking to you, you know, weeks ago. What are you doing out there killing our guys again? Well, you know, I'm just doing what I'm told to do, or they'll kill me. You know, my own guys will kill me if I don't do it. So what would you do? And so there was this rotation of, we were at the lowest level. We were the first group to interrogate these prisoners. Then after we were done, we would send them up to division to be interrogated again. We call it the Holiday Inn, where they got up 3 meals a day, a nice hot bed, no mosquitoes. You know, most of them were infected with malaria to one degree or another, so no mosquitoes and no bugs. Probably a good, nice TV, a flush toilet. Shoot, they never had it so good. In one sense, you know, at least, and then they were getting shot at, which was the best reason of all. But then they knew about that up there at the division level. Of course, they weren't talking. No, I didn't kill anybody. No, I wasn't trying to hurt anyone. No, false charges. And of course, there was no way to prove it. The way combat's moving and stuff going on so fast. So you couldn't prove they were bad guys, right? And so they'd release them. And they'd head back out and get forced or either willingly join up with their Viet Cong buddies and go kill Americans again. And this was happening like 3 times in a period of about 2 months. It began to intensify. Well, of course, part of us, the word was from some of our group, don't even bring them in. Just shoot them, waste them. This is you know, they're going to kill Americans one way or another, so just shoot them in, you know, shoot them before bringing them in. Don't even bring them in. I didn't say that. Others did. I might have wished it, but I didn't want anybody to die. I didn't have, you know, I've never been into killing people or wanting people to be killed. I understood why it happened over there, but it didn't mean that in my heart I wanted anybody to really get killed. So the other procedure, when we were done with the prisoners, we turned them over to the local national police. I could be wrong. I think they were appendage of the national police in South Vietnam anyway. The local cops. And we had one guy that was the police chief in this little village of Duc Pho that our military base was close by too. It looked just like Barney Fife on Andy and Mayberry. This guy was a splitting image. He just spoke Vietnamese, but he looked just like Barney. We called him Barney. He never had a clue what we were talking about because he didn't, didn't have TV. But anyway, that's beside the point. So, and he had a few people working underneath him. So we would release these all prisoners when we were done with them to Barney Fife, and Barney would then make arrangements to have them transported back out into their villages and hamlets where they lived, as was convenient for that to happen. Well, the South Vietnamese police, knowing what was going on with these prisoners getting released and coming back and shooting both Americans and South Vietnamese troops, that wasn't right. They didn't figure. So what they would do is covertly take these prisoners out of town where nobody could see it happening, and they'd shoot them in the back of the head. They'd stand up on a bridge, shoot them back of the head, shove them down, and fall into the river. The river flowed out about a mile or two out into the ocean where the sharks could eat them then. And that put them out of commission. Now, I never saw that happen, but I was told it was happening, and it was out of my hands. It was out of all of our hands, because once we gave it to the national police, the local police, call it what you will, they had jurisdiction, could do anything they wanted to do. And so that's how in our area hardcore prisoners were being treated, and so that word got out to all the Viet Cong and all of the troops, and so we didn't take any more prisoners. We caught them shooting at us, we just shoot them out there rather than play the silly game of, that I just shared. So that basically was about as much as I'm going to share about my time in Vietnam. There was nothing but frustration, pain, frustration. Everybody had it. Nobody was exempt, but so were the South Vietnamese. If you were to ask me today, I'm 78 and a half years old. Nothing has changed from the time I left Vietnam to present. If you'd asked me if there was anything positive about your time in Vietnam, truthfully I would say no, there wasn't. No, there was absolutely nothing that I can think of that was a good experience, a good memory. I became a better person for it in life. I'd say just the opposite. Years later, the dreams never stopped. They intensified. When I left Vietnam, many of the tormenting dreams that I would have all night long was I was taken prisoner by them. They were torturing me to get information out of me, sometimes just to make me feel the pain that I had inflicted on them. So the roles were reversed. It was tough to try to get to sleep. It was tough staying asleep. It would wear you out mentally. And so I drugged up, mostly through alcohol, over-the-counter sleeping pills in time by the handful at times, to get a little bit of sleep at night. And years later, long story short, they tested me for PTSD, which I didn't believe I had. And they said, yeah, for sure you've got it. The chronic dreaming, tormenting dreaming is a typical sign of it. I itched all the time. I constantly itched. I noticed if I was going to church years later, I could look around and everybody's listening to the message, but here I am having a scratch and itch. Why? Then I noticed I got into serious bow hunting white-tailed deer. I'd be in a tree stand, you'd spend hours waiting for this big old buck to come in, or a little skinny buck. You get close enough to take a shot at him and you have to be perfectly still. Otherwise these deer are gonna look at you see you through peripheral vision. So you gotta stay perfectly still, right? Well, and that might be 15, 20 minutes, half an hour from where they are until they get close enough for you to shoot, if they are gonna get close enough. And here I am, I've got a scratch, I've got an itch. Well, you can't move, Norm. They'll see that movement. I got it. And it'd drive me so crazy that usually it was on my face and arms where I had an itch and scratch. But I kept that secret. I never told anybody. So years later, they tested me for PTSD and they were asking for different questions about life. And I told about this itching. I said, let me ask you a question. Because I was into denial. I'm not PTSD. I might be screwed up, but I'm not PTSD, which was typical of a lot of Vietnam vets as it is today. Men is, suck it up, boy, life is not easy, and you wimp, no, you're fine. Well, with the chronic dreaming, and then some other health issues were kicking in from Agent Orange, we surmise. I had a situation where I hurt my back before going to Vietnam that never was able to take care of itself. That's almost a video of its own. What a nightmare that was. But today I don't sleep, I don't walk, I can't do hardly anything because of back issues. Had a 4-level fusion cage surgery, 2016. It helped a little to keep me from being paralyzed. But the military for me was an absolute negative. I guess you could say, was I proud to serve? Well, let's just let it go on record. I joined the Army in hopes that I could stay out of Vietnam and get some training that might help me after I got out of the military. I did not think getting sent, being drafted, and I had buddies and friends that were being drafted every day, being sent off, here's your rifle, learn how to dodge AK-47 bullets behind stalks of rice out in the middle of a rice paddy. Good luck. I didn't think that's the way I wanted to end my life or come back with blown off legs, limbs, whatever. So I joined hoping that that would keep me out of Vietnam. Well, they fooled me. They sent me over there anyway. And then told me I was going to be a prisoner of war interrogator, which did me absolutely no good after I got out of the military, right? So all in all, it was a bad experience for me. My job was not to try to keep the communists from overrunning South Vietnam as much as it was to try to keep my crew members, the guys out there fighting every day, sleeping all night, with mortar fire coming in, attacks, bugs, diseases, you name it. Keep them alive somehow, some way. You had a sense that, helping your buddies stay alive and get back home after their time was done was the most important thing. And I guess indirectly it was for your country, I don't know. But so anyway, that was I do want to say something before I stop this Vietnam thing, that when I got radically born again, when God kept me from taking my own life at age 35, which I was going to do, and I got radically born again, Jesus showed up miraculously and changed everything in my life, thank God. Sometime shortly thereafter that, I asked God to heal me of the tormenting dreams that I had from, see, I was age 20 when I was in Vietnam, so at age 35 when I was looking at suicide, that's 15 years of rotten night's sleep, hungover, heart issues, all kinds of issues, health issues from the chronic dreaming and no sleep, sleep deprivation, stress at work because I had, oh Lord, on and on and on. So I asked God to relieve me of the dreams so I could sleep better at night. Well, he removed almost instantly these dreams of me being captured and being tormented, being interrogated, tormented. He removed those dreams. But I still kept dreaming, though they were less. And over the years, the dreaming to currently now, I'm a chronic dreamer. I dream, most people can't comprehend unless I guess you have PTSD, and not every symptom is the same as everybody else's. But I will be in a full-blown technicolor dream and not even be asleep. I start dreaming first and then fall off to sleep if I can. And they've given me some medication that's come out the last 2-3 years. VA has that. It's a blood pressure med that helps some vets who have trouble sleeping, mainly dreams. It subdues the intensity of those dreams. And that medication has really helped me a lot. It's called Prazosin. If you're a vet and have never heard of it, works really great for me. I mean, I wish it'd make all the dreams go away, but I'll take anything I can get, so I'm thankful for them. But I've had heart issues, atrial fib for years, 20 years now, off and on. Got heart murmur that's growing, diabetes too. Got a hand starting to shake when I'd rather it not. That's usually the first signs of Parkinson's. All of those things, and anxiety, emotions getting stretched. You don't like to talk about it, but health issues, physical issues. It's very common with guys that were in Vietnam and where Agent Orange was. It got into the water supply, it got everywhere. And so I would surmise all of my other brothers and sisters don't have heart issues, don't have diabetes, don't have dreaming issues, you know. So anyway, I don't see that being in the military helped me at all.